Still says there. Welcome to the CrackBerry podcast, episode 117 for Thursday, June the 19th, 2014. Hey everybody, Kevin Mitchelluk here, founder of CrackBerry.com. Fired from being the editor-in-chief, though. We're going to talk about that later. Also fired from CrackBerry, Adam Zeiss.
Hi, boo. At least he was gracious enough to actually do the intro, though, so...
Well, habits die hard. Still contributing to Mobile Nation, Simon Sage, ridiculously tall, on location in Waterloo for BlackBerry's annual general meeting of shareholders today.
Yep.
And last but not least, the new interim editor-in-chief of CrackBerry.com, Blaze.
Howdy.
So we're going to get into the details on all that soon. We're having some fun. It's not a depressing thing. It's actually pretty awesome. I've never been so excited to, well, it's the only time I've ever been excited to fire somebody, because laying off people and firing people is like the worst thing you can really do in your life as a, you know, for a company. But it's kind of fun when you're like doing it to yourself. So it's all about Blaze now. We've got the chat room going, and today is Thursday, what is it, June 18th, 19th? I don't even know the date.
19th. June 19th.
But it's a big day for BlackBerry because it was an earnings day today. And we're not depressed. We're actually in a fairly good mood. And typically it's like every quarter we have this podcast after an earnings report. And for the last few years, they tend to not be the best podcasts. But everything went pretty well today. I think BlackBerry, you know, sort of beat the street's expectations. The stock is up 10.74% as we're recording this right now. You know, there's still challenges for the company, obviously. There's going to be for some time. But, you know, John Chen, through the earnings call, through the AGM that followed, I think he delivered very good straight-up answers. He's very on point. He's not pulling any punches or trying to sugarcoat things. And he's showing that, you know, in only 7 months, they're starting to correct that course. And you know, they showed an accounting profit this quarter, whereas most people were expecting maybe a loss. And they're showing that there's things in the pipeline coming out and a cohesive plan of action that, you know, is going to carry BlackBerry forward for months and years to come. And I think the best line of the day, if you go on Twitter to @BlackBerry CEO, is where he said, you know, BlackBerry will be around much longer than your post office, which is pretty awesome. So he's got faith, and we have a lot to talk about today, including the fun stuff, devices, because he showed off the BlackBerry Classic, which we knew was coming officially, and he also made official the BlackBerry codename Windermere, and gave it the name for all of us, which is the BlackBerry Passport, which now I'm incredibly excited about. So I don't know, Blaze, it's your show. Where do you want to start? We're going to hand the reins over to you by the end of this thing.
Devices is a good place to start. You know, the Windermere has been one of those rumored devices for a long period of time. We've seen some leaked images of it appear, you know, and although the images weren't exactly the best that appeared, it's kind of incredible that they actually kept it as much of a secret as what they did in terms of the photos and stuff like that. There's only been, you know, realistically 4 or 5 images, and the images weren't the best. So you had that. That was nice to see, finally. And to be honest, it was kind of a big surprise that they actually brought it out and announced it. I mean, I figured they would, you know, maybe possibly announce it. I didn't expect that they would totally, fully unveil it at this event. And, of course, they showed off the BlackBerry Classic as well. The BlackBerry Classic was, you know, already announced many months ago. It's been so long that I can't even remember how many months.
At Barcelona at Mobile World Congress, so that would have been in February when they showed off the Z3, the Z3, and then they just said the Classic was coming and bringing back the tool belt.
Yeah, so you know, for them to actually go ahead and finally give us a look at that device, that was pretty awesome to see. And I think a lot of people were actually surprised, you know, how nice the Classic actually looks. But I think, you know, just going through the comments after people have actually seen the Passport now, I think there's a lot more appreciation for that particular device now that it's out there and people have actually seen, you know, real live images of it. it's not this crappy little thing that's just there, right?
Now, Simon, you were in the room with John Chen today. You didn't just see photos online like the rest of us did. You got to see it in person, and I mean the photos make it look better than any of the renders or leaks we've seen before by a big mile. So how does it look face to face?
Definitely much better than the stuff that we've seen before. I think the biggest concern people had was kind of the ergonomics with the Windermere there. It seemed like the keyboard was too low and crunched up, and the proportions seemed really square and blockish. But I talked to a few people there who had been playing around with it for a while, and the ergonomics work out well apparently. I didn't have a lot of time to really play with it myself, but seeing how John is holding it in the air, it doesn't look weird at all. It's curved around the back too, so I think it'll be comfortable that way. It wasn't really something that you got a really clear view of in the first few leaked pictures.
Now, my theory is this was a phone that probably started in development before John Chen came to the helm of BlackBerry, designed for people with huge hands like Torsten Heinz and Christian TR, the former COO, and
Simon Sage,
the former CEO, and Simon Sage, right? I'm like, this was the phone for you guys. And I don't actually know, like, does the development time go back that far, sort of pre-Foxconn agreements, or is this something that popped up really quick with, since John Chen's come on board? Blaze, do you have any insight to that?
I think a lot of the devices, like the Classic, was already in the pipeline. The Windermere or Passport was already in the pipeline. So I think, I don't officially know or anything like that, of course, but I think that all those devices that are coming out now are essentially stuff that was already in development, in the pipeline, and I don't necessarily think that any of the devices that we've seen thus far are or could be called a John Chen device. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't think we've yet seen what he thinks is the perfect BlackBerry. I think we're only seeing what everybody else thought was the perfect BlackBerry at this point.
I'm trying to think back because I had insight into this with when they made the decision to put the tool belt back on the phone, and it's months preceding the announcement when I remember talking to some folks from BlackBerry, and they were kind of probing me for if I thought the community would want to see it back. Like, do you think there's big demand from this based on what you're seeing from the forums, etc.? But I can't remember what month that was. If it was in the fall or in the summer, or if it was after JC came into power. One thing they've said is they can turn around on devices much more quickly than in the past, depending what the long pull is. Is it software or hardware that's the bottleneck in bringing something to market? But I don't know. I mean, either way, kind of exciting. I will say that I'm much more excited about the Passport and Windermere today than I was yesterday, and it's really ridiculous, but I think the name is what does it for me. Looking at the phone in the past, I'm like, what is this thing? The proportions are weird. It just seems odd. But now I look at it as just a brilliant marketing thing where, the problem with, say, the Classic is it's going to come out, and to the average person on the street, they're not going to know if it's a new or old BlackBerry because it's got the keyboard, it's got the tool belt. It could, people could think it's a Bold 9900 from a distance across the room or something. Then this Passport's going to come out, and it has dimensions like nothing else we've ever seen from BlackBerry or I think anybody else. The Passport name, very memorable. It kind of describes that shape. And whether people like it or love it or don't like it, it's going to make a statement. You're going to see people at the airport with these things, and people are going to know, like, oh, that's the new BlackBerry. There's no mistaking it for an old anything.
But does it come in white?
Yeah, he said it will. Confirmed, coming in 2 colors at launch, black or white. Take your pick.
Thank God.
So, it comes in white.
Now, my only request now, other than it coming in white, is I really hope they bring back a BlackBerry 8700 style holster, so I can just wear it on my hip with pride in case it's too big for pockets, and just get that vibration, whip it out, and it goes right back to you get a notification, it opens up right to whatever the notification is for, and that would be amazing. Go old school with it.
As for how far back the Classic goes, I think regardless of whether or not it was developed, if development started on it before Chen's time, Chen was super gung ho about it. Like he was visibly pumped to have the trackpad back and all the physical buttons. So I think that he at very least help accelerate it. You might remember during the AGM, he kind of joked a little bit about having to wrestle with the engineers to keep the tool belt in there, because a lot of them thought it was just a step towards the past. But if they're getting a demand for it in older markets, or even just older BlackBerry users, the guys who are used to the way old legacy BlackBerry works, and they just want to keep doing that, I think it's a sensible move.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's not about it's not necessarily a growth device. It's about upgrading your existing user base to a newer phone and getting them to sign on for another 2-year contract or whatever it is. And for BlackBerry, they have a very big user base that's sort of declining and churning. So anything they can do that forces an upgrade cycle, especially in enterprise where they do still have a good foothold, it's going to be a big deal for them right now. I think on that note too, probably my single biggest takeaway from today was an answer that John Chen gave during the Q&A session of the earnings call in regards to the number of devices, number of phones they need to sell in a year to break even. And basically in this question, or in his answer, he said, we need to sell 10 million phones a year to break even. That's the model or to be profitable on handsets. That's the model we're going for. And I think for me, that gives me a lot more confidence that we'll continue to see hardware and everything else. Because Chen came into BlackBerry. He said, well, what's BlackBerry without the hardware? And he made it fairly clear that he wanted to make phones. But at the same time, he said, look, we need to make a profit here for the company. And very quickly, he changed the message around BlackBerry. Prior to Chen, I think if you heard the name BlackBerry, you just immediately thought of the phones and phone sales and nothing else. Even if you're in the industry, even guys like us, I think we always kind of thought about BlackBerry as just being phones, and everything else is kind of complementary that they do, but it was still a business centered around selling phones. And even friends who work for the company would tell me the same thing. Every decision BlackBerry made, whether it was about features or marketing or things to load onto phones, etc., it was always about how does this help us sell another phone. And what he did is he said, no, BlackBerry is a portfolio of 4 businesses, at least right now. Enterprise, BES services, handsets, messaging, which is BBM, and then QNX, right, with the device-to-device, machine-to-machine type computing platform and everything. And each of those 4 business units needs to be profitable. And if they're not, he's going to make changes for them. And I think this gives a lot of clarity to say, okay, within the company known as BlackBerry and these 4 divisions, here's the handset business. It needs to sell 10 million devices a year. As long as we can do that, and we're comfortable, we're aiming for that goal, continue to see, you're going to keep seeing new phones from us and everything else. And it's not a huge number when you look at the size of the world. It's not necessarily an easy to attain number either, given the current quarterly sales, but it's a number I believe they can definitely do, and with a couple of hit devices, they can maybe blow it away. And I think right now that 10 million number is really about upgrading their user base, which is probably why you see the Classic and the Passport being the first 2 devices beyond the Z3, and not necessarily another touchscreen on the roadmap he showed off today. I think one thing Blaze and I were talking about after the earnings call, and even during it though, or after the AGM I should say, some people are panicking like, well, if there's not another high-end touchscreen device, I'm not, I might have to leave BlackBerry now. And I think it's important to note that there's a big difference between fiscal 2015 and the calendar year 2015. So he kind of showed 3 devices for 2015 fiscal, but that really only takes us into the start of calendar year 2015. So it's not maybe that long off before we see more high-end touchscreen devices beyond that. And I mean, the hard work is done on touchscreen for RIM, or for BlackBerry. So I don't see why they wouldn't do another high-end device.
Whew. Yeah, I mean, the Z30 is not that old anyway, right? It's what, maybe 6 months old? I think we had a review up in October thereabouts. So I think there's still some life there for handling BlackBerry at the upper end for the foreseeable future.
Totally agree.
Yeah, they got to do something to keep people happy in that arena as well. So, like Kevin said, they're not going to go, or at least I would hope they wouldn't. Not any longer anyway, now that they're in a little bit of a better situation, not go for any long stretch of period of time without actually releasing some sort of device. Like, you can't, we're not just going to get the LTE Z3, the Classic, and the Passport. There has to be more than that, right?
Yeah. Now, I think timing. What's interesting is the Classic is going to come after the Passport, even though they announced the Classic back in February, and that's still on track for I think November. But Passport, he said, is going to be unveiled officially at a launch event in London in September. I think that was the story.
Yeah.
And I think
Which
that
also,
comes back.
That also brings up the fact that these are coming to Europe first. He made a point of that clear in the media scrum that Europe's going to be the first stop. That's kind of a given for a London event, but
yeah, no, it makes sense, and I think it comes back to what we said about what's the long pole or in the hardware development cycle. And obviously the Passport is a little bit more akin to the Q10, right, in terms of software. But there's some interesting things there where it looks like they've removed some buttons from the keyboard, and they're going to be putting those onto the touchscreen for some of the alternate characters and things like that. But for the Classic, I mean, they're really changing what they've done, right? They're adding back the tool belt, the trackpad, and they need to make the UI reflect all those changes. So I think that's a longer development cycle, most likely, simply due to all the changes to that user experience. I mean, that kind of goes back to even why the Q10 launched after the Z10 was, I think the UI guys designed BB10 around touchscreen, and then when they thought about a keyboard, they didn't have all the UI stuff done, and they had to come back and make some changes that took longer.
So go ahead.
I just want to say I think I'm more excited for the Classic than I am for the Passport, just from looking at them, because I've been a big Q10 fan, and I feel I haven't seen it or held it or anything, obviously, but I feel like the Passport is going to be a little over the top because it's wider than like a Note 3, which I have and I can barely hold on to with one hand. So I think it's a lot of phone, and it'll be interesting, and I'll definitely want to check it out and play with it. But I think I like to have just kind of not necessarily a huge phone, but I have like my Nexus 5 or even my Z10. I almost prefer to the Z30 sometimes, just because it's there and it's small and you can hold on to it and do your stuff. And I think the way the Classic looks, how it's kind of narrow and slimmed down a little bit, I think it'll be a better fit for me.
Yeah, and you're not alone there either, because there's a lot of people, even though it seems like the majority of the market has essentially moved to bigger devices. The bigger the better, Like, I'm pretty sure like that Samsung, what was it, Simon, the Samsung Galaxy F or something like that, that's only coming out in Korea. It's like a 7-inch phone or something like that. It literally is just a tablet with some phone parts shoved into it. You look ridiculous carrying that around and actually using that. There's obviously people out there, but there's also still a market for people who actually want a 4.5-inch device, and whatever the case may be, anything under that. Some feel that the Z10 is the perfect size for them and don't want to move on to anything bigger. If BlackBerry is not going to offer them something in that exact same size, then they probably won't choose a BlackBerry, right? So there still has to be that, some sort of balance in between there. You can't have just this ridiculously large phone out there.
I think that's the tough thing too, because you have all these people that are diehard touchscreen where they have either their Z10 or excuse me, the Z30. They're going to want that upgrade come the fall when these other devices come out. So, the keyboard fans are obviously going to have a good spot because they'll have these devices to choose from. But down the road, there's, like you said before, they have to have other devices in the hopper because they're going to have more full touchscreen devices to keep those people happy too. So it'll be interesting to see what else they come up with.
I just say, shut up and take my money, BlackBerry. I want both of them. Oh, maybe that could be the name of our podcast. Shut up.
You're not supposed to say it this early. You're supposed to wait till the end. That's where we pick our titles, but that's okay.
If we wait till the end, it's going to be Everybody's Fired Except Blaze, which is maybe less of
a great title.
Well, in any case, I already put it on the thing, so most people already thought. Okay. Whatever
you want to do.
So we're still trying to fetch Yumi, and he is out there somewhere. So
he's probably driving his new Tesla around.
Yeah, can't blame him for that. So rather than jumping into numbers right now, we'll just let Yumi see if Yumi actually does arrive. What do you guys think about the Amazon deal?
Well, I just want to say, Blaze, that was a brilliant executive decision right there. I think you rolled with the punches. You're assessing the situation. Boom, boom, boom. So proud. So proud right now.
The only problem is
I want to say,
I don't know what to do if Yumi doesn't show up. So.
We'll fudge our way through it. But I also want to say Blaze went to bed early last night, so he could be up to do the earnings report, get the press release up right away. I was like, oh my god, just tears down my eyes. I'm so excited here.
Amazing.
Okay, I think we should totally talk about that, Blaze.
I think Amazon is good, and I don't think that anybody really saw where it was coming from. And a lot of people say that it's kind of the same thing we've had, because in 10.2.1 you can already install these Android apps over there, and there's all these third-party app stores like Snap and everything, and you can sideload the Amazon App Store right now. But it's going to be a game changer because they're making it available to people that aren't geeky like us, that will go and sit down and look for how do I get Android apps on my BlackBerry. It's going to be there, so they're going to see the Amazon App Store, and they're going to be able to click things without plugging into their computer or doing any extra work, and they're going to be able to install apps, and they're going to work 95% for the most part. So I think it's going to be a huge thing, because it opens up this whole other app ecosystem that people want. Where are the apps, and they don't have to jump through these hoops anymore to get there. Even if we've had it for years, and it won't really be new to us per se, but I think for regular consumers and people that haven't wanted to put in the effort before, it's going to be a big deal for sure.
Yeah, it's one barrier of entry to actually using your device removed. You don't have to worry about it anymore, because it's going to be there. You don't have to worry about downloading some shady APK files or even knowing how to install those APK files. Once BlackBerry 10.3 rolls out, you see the Amazon App Store loaded there. You also see BlackBerry World, which is interesting, and there's arguments to be made that they should have just found a way to incorporate Amazon into BlackBerry World, kind of like how they have Android apps somewhat identifiable within BlackBerry World. So maybe they could have Jeremy Duke, he did up a great design of integration of the Amazon App Store apps, at least, into BlackBerry World. You just have the little Amazon logo. That way it's coming directly from Amazon, not necessarily BlackBerry World, and you take that into consideration. That's a great idea. But in any case, it is what it is. They're going to have two app stores, and people are going to have to go ahead and choose from one or the other. If they're not finding in there, it's a little bit of a tricky situation, but overall I think it will work out for the best, because they have more apps. People want apps, and they're filling that void.
I think part of this comes to the business decision also, and if you put yourself in John Chen's shoes, and he looks at probably the cost of running the entire BlackBerry DevRel team, the whole BlackBerry World system, like just all the money associated with building it out. Think about all the things they've been working on the last couple of years between BB Jams and all this, and then you probably look at what's it achieved in terms of app catalog to date, but also active app development right now. Where are they at? And I mean, Blaze, you've said many times, right? We're not seeing that much hot new native apps come to BB10 right now. There's a bit of a drought there. And we saw Alex Saunders, who headed up the BlackBerry DevRel team, shift to the QNX side, kind of leading up Project Ion recently. And I think for me, that was the indicator to expect something sooner than later in terms of an announcement and a decision. And you saw John Chen today really, and yesterday in the Fox News interview, and that really say, this is a play where I now have a solution for my consumers. That, to quote Jim Balsillie, takes care of the app tonnage you need. We just need a volume of decently good apps in our app store to be in the game, and hopefully there's lots of good big name things in there. And I think what we don't know is just what the longer term future looks like. To me, it feels like this is and there's been some rumors also recently about more layoffs coming to BlackBerry. I don't know if they've happened yet, and I think part of those rumors, I forget, was that, I think it might have been Lucas on N4BB or somebody put him out there, and I haven't dug deep to follow up, but I think they pointed towards it being related to the app dev side of things and BB World side of things internally, at least some of those numbers. So if you look at those things lining up, it kind of makes sense where Chen can and BlackBerry can save money on the one hand by doing this kind of deal, and for consumers who haven't bought a BlackBerry yet, it's probably a better experience than what they're currently getting. And then for the hardcore people who know how to use Snap and sideload and everything else, well, they're just going to find what they can. And then whatever BB10 native developers are left, and building cool things, or if it's more on the enterprise side where it's custom development work, taking unique advantage of all of the native things, that's going to happen, but it's not a consumer problem at that point. It's more of an enterprise opportunity.
Sure. I mean, as long as BlackBerry's been flirting with Android, they've always been strategically in the same kind of position as Amazon in that, they're working with an operating system made by Google, but they're keeping Google itself at arm's length. So I think that this kind of partnership could have happened, long before now. And I'm really curious to see what it does with BlackBerry's relationship with Google. That obviously we're missing a lot of key Google apps on BlackBerry. We've been missing them for a while. Back on legacy BlackBerry, Google Maps was great, and I would love to see a proper first-party Google Maps solution on BB10. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Or whatever. The third-party one was good.
It works very well for sure. But I mean, if I take a look at my experience on iPad, all of my most used applications on there are Google Apps. It's Gmail, it's YouTube, it's Google Maps. And if we never see that on BlackBerry 10, I'm going to be a little sad. They're really, really good apps, and they're really important to have.
As long as Google Maps works and I can get my Gmail experience decently well through whatever the native email solution is, I'm all right.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario because everybody would like to have all of those Google services on there, except for the people who don't actually use Google or are worried about privacy concerns and all that stuff. But
and that's BlackBerry users, right? I mean, that's why a lot of our users like it. It's security and privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said, Simon, with BlackBerry and Amazon sort of both doing the exact same thing when it comes to the app situation and how they're working with Android, it's a good fit, and I think it's going to work out for them to their advantage. I mean, it does sort of feel bad. I feel bad for a lot of developers in some respects, native BlackBerry developers, because I don't know, it just seems like, when they took away BlackBerry themes, they basically told BlackBerry theme developers, "Hey, start building BlackBerry 10 apps. They'll be great. They'll fill the void for your creativity and stuff like that." And some of them took it, and now they're going that. And now they're sort of kind of being told to go somewhere else in some respects. I mean, to be honest, I don't know what extent it is that they're actually telling BlackBerry developers to go with. Like, they're not telling BlackBerry developers, BlackBerry native developers, to go build Android apps directly, but they're sort of
they kind of are at the same time.
That's going to be the way to go, right?
Well, they're kind of telling them that they should do that because they can do better because they're going to have Android apps there, so they're going to be able to get them on BlackBerry and get them on Android at the same time. So I think essentially that's kind of however weird way they're doing it, they're kind of pushing them that way.
Most of the app developers I know are really, really, really smart guys. In fact, all the ones I know are very smart guys, and I don't think they need to be told. They've kind of seen the trajectory of certain things and had a pretty good inkling of where things are going. And at that point, when you're building something, you're assessing the risks anyways. Do I build for this platform or this platform? Do I build for both or not? And the people who choose BB10 to develop natively for, they know what they're getting into. And now I think there's a new sort of dynamic and landscape, and they're going to have the same conversations, and they're going to make some decisions, and it might be to build Android first now with BB10 in mind and hit both.
Yeah, it makes sense. I can roll with that.
Devs are smart, they know.
Yeah. So that's Amazon, and the developer agreement's all taken care of, and Yumi's still not here.
Well, we should talk about 10.3 because Amazon is going to roll out with 10.3, right? So that kind of shows that the runtime in 10.3 obviously is I think a little bit improved on Android to the point where they're comfortable supporting this.
Yeah, even directly from that early leak build of 10.3 and recent information, it all leads towards the fact that the Android runtime has at least improved a good amount. So I think previously the Android runtime probably wasn't up to par as what it was. I've spoken negatively about the Android runtime. I have no problem saying that previously because, when it, for example, when it was on Gingerbread, it didn't necessarily feel like a feasible solution at that point in time. Everything was just sticky and just terrible. And anyways, but now that they got it updated and they're adding more improvements to it, I think, like you said, they've reached that point where they're satisfied with it. And of course, there's a ton of other improvements that are actually coming with BlackBerry 10.3, so it feels more like a complete solution now. And I think that's something that they can't really let up on either. Like, we know 10.3 is coming, we know 10.3.1 is coming, and they need to keep improving, the environment of BlackBerry 10. Like, you can't stop. You can't just say, okay, we've reached this point and everything feels cool. You need to keep on improving it, because I'm sure every one of us here, when you picked up BlackBerry 10.0.0.1, you weren't necessarily fully satisfied with it. It was a full experience. It was a new experience, but it didn't feel like a fully complete experience. There was things missing, and BlackBerry has improved and added back a lot of that stuff. Even today, they're talking about BBM and broadcast messages and emoticons. They're bringing a lot of the previous BlackBerry OS stuff back to BB10, which is good because that's something that we've addressed it before, but the people that were behind the development of BlackBerry 10 didn't necessarily think about that stuff or realize how important some of the stuff that was removed in BlackBerry 10 from BlackBerry OS was actually useful. Like, they didn't know that it was useful. Like, bedside mode. Kevin complained about bedside mode. We got bedside mode back.
And I got to the bottom of that, and it was a really silly thing, right? This was and that's a good example because you don't always know who to blame. Is it that, hey, we're building a new platform from the ground up, so yes, there's features day one we want there, but they're just going to take too long, and we need to ship a product. So it's really development time that was the holdback, or is it a case of, you know what, we want to simplify the experience, we're going mainstream with BB10, we need to just make it really clean and easy, so then some of the power features get removed intentionally, or is it something else? And in the case of bedside mode on BB10 at launch, my understanding from, and this is what was told to me by Don Lindsay, who was the UI guy, now he's not at BlackBerry anymore, but what he said was this was a case where, BlackBerry acquired TAT, the Astonishing Tribe. They had a graphics person. BlackBerry assembled into lots of little teams to tackle all the development. Different groups of people are working on different native apps, etc. And the person who was working on the alarm clock wanted to simplify it and just kind of took it out, right? They just designed it out of there to clean up the process. And I guarantee you that person from TAT, and I love the TAT people, I think they're very creative, but the odds are, he or she may not even have owned a BlackBerry before or used bedside mode before, given how recent that acquisition was, design-driven nature of the company, etc. I think a lot of them were more iPhone users and that kind of thing. So they killed out a feature that turned out to be extremely important to some people. It kind of reminds me of our design director, David, who works for Mobile Nations. And we often argue with him the same thing, right? He wants to simplify and clean up everything and do this. And then all the time I'm like, what are you doing? Like, our power users, our hardcore members, if you do that, they're going to revolt on your ass. So I think it's the internal struggle of engineers and power users versus designers going for clean, simplified aesthetics. And there's a happy balance in the middle, which I think now you're seeing BB10 started very cleaned out. In some areas, feature deprived due to just too much work to be done, and in other cases, they thought maybe they could take it out and they'd wait and see what the users wanted before they put it back in. But now we're getting back to a really filled-in OS again that brings back a lot of the hardcore power user features.
Yeah, a lot of people want the auto on and off back.
Yeah.
And believe it or not,
it's funny because when we were in Montreal, whenever that was, last weekend or the week before, and I was using my 9930 for the whole weekend, and it was an experience. It was good and bad, because I always have this love for the 9900 and 9930 and for BlackBerry OS, and there's so many little things that are just so efficient, and the keyboard's great. But at the same time, you can obviously see how outdated it is. Like there's things where, like in the calendar, I can't sync multiple Google calendars anymore. The email sync is crappier than it is on BlackBerry 10, and just little bits and pieces. But there were still some, great things, these keyboard shortcuts to get around, and just the multitasking in the menu and everything. So it's interesting to look at it and see a lot of the features that aren't in BlackBerry 10 are just kind of buried in BlackBerry 10 that didn't carry over. So hopefully they'll get to a point, which I think they'll be too soon, where all the the necessary features for the power users are back in BlackBerry 10.
And I think for the opposite spectrum is, okay, they're adding in lots of the little detailed features which hardcore users like, but I think they're also working on the big swipes that address the more mainstream consumer needs, like apps, right? The Amazon App Store announcement, that more than anything is going to help people in stores sell BlackBerries, or consumers to say, oh yeah, you know what? It's got apps now. BlackBerry has apps now, and that was my takeaway from that announcement. Is anything that makes spreads a message that, hey, new BlackBerries have lots of apps is a good message. Whether it's Android or native, and that's like the second level of detail. The first level is simply, yes, there's apps on BlackBerry, and that's still been something that's everybody has said that's been sort of the number one thing holding back BB10 sales in a lot of respects, coupled with a bit of a beat up brand sentiment in specific markets.
Yeah, they addressed that on the call too. Like one of the guys asked questions about the marketing and stuff like that, and going into a Rogers store and how Rogers wasn't necessarily fully supporting the devices, and how BlackBerry was dealing with that.
No, it's exactly right. And it's going to be a mission. I've been doing a lot of traveling lately for the other aspects of my job, and I spent a lot of time in the States recently. And you just see it. There's a lot of work to do to build back the BlackBerry brand, and it's going to take new phones that get attention. It's going to take a lot of hits. It's going to take positive earnings days like today, where hopefully the majority of the mainstream media coverage is at least more positive. It's not doom and gloom. And maybe it'll come back with time. But in other markets, they're still enjoying a lot of success and a lot of positive brand sentiment. So the hot stuff is going to hopefully sell really well right out of the gate without as much hard work to be done on marketing.
I think the difference is crazy, like you were saying, because here in the States, it's, they're very few and far between, except for the business people that are using BlackBerry devices. I used to see tons of people with bolts and curves that would come in the bar all the time, but that's been kind of phased out, and they're using Android and iPhone devices now. But when we were in Montreal, I kept pointing it out. I felt like I was like a little kid, because every time I saw like somebody using a Q10, like I would elbow Kevin, like it was the most amazing thing, not realizing that it's it's in Canada and he probably sees them all the time. We were waiting in line at Schwartz's the one day, and the girl in front of us had a Q10 with this busted up screen, and I was like blown away. I'm like, not only is she using a BlackBerry, she's using a broken BlackBerry. Like, it's the most amazing thing ever, But it is totally different. I mean, to find somebody around here,
honestly,
in the States at this point with a BlackBerry device, it's very rare.
I was in South Beach last week, though, and honestly, I saw a lot of BB10 devices, and I think part of that is still maybe it's been strong in South America, Latin America, and Miami has a lot of that connection there. But I saw tons of Q10s, just clearly like keyboard lovers, old guys, hot lady. I don't know how to describe the term here. I'm myself in trouble. And I saw a lot of Q10s, more than I've seen, anywhere lately. So I'm like, all right, I felt pretty good about that. There was one really good-looking lady sitting in the SLS hotel. Sorry.
Was it your fiance?
Yeah.
Hey, just because the position's filled doesn't mean I'm not accepting resumes.
I don't even know what that means.
It means just because you're tied up with a fiance or wife doesn't mean you shouldn't be accepting resumes, or at least on the lookout for resumes.
Pretty sure that's not how it works.
Okay.
I think that's the whole point of being tied up, is that you don't accept resumes.
Got it. Well, see,
unless it's different in Canada, I'm not sure.
I'm shutting up right now.
Not sure.
Blaze, where do you want to take us? Take us along.
I guess we should hit the earnings.
And Yumi's not here. Can we just skip it? We can't talk numbers without Yumi.
Let's do the fun part of the numbers, because I remember some stuff without having to read too much on it. So the thing that I found impressive was they actually increased their cash and assets, or short-term assets, from, what was it, 2.7 billion to over 3. So they added like $400 million in money. And I think that's one of the really sort of impressive things. Now, the way they're doing that isn't exactly through increased sales. Revenue is declining still. And if you break it down by market, you can see, even quarter over quarter. Like, last year in North America, they did $297 million. This quarter, they did $276. They grew a little bit in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Last quarter was $412 million. This quarter, $414. Both Latin America and Asia Pacific held on to some similar numbers. So, and if you look at sort of the year over year, the U.S. declined a lot, or North America declined a lot. I mean, all the markets declined, but I think there's sort of a flat line they've hit if you look quarter over quarter, and I think Chen kind of addressed that, right? So, if you think about, okay, numbers are sliding, and that's really scary. If you look quarter to now, they kind of have bottomed. And at the same time, they've been doing a lot of things to put more money on their books, from the accounting perspective. And a lot of that is cost reductions and all that kind of stuff.
Real estate sales, etc. And yes, it's a little bit like it's operating the business. These are where the finance guys and the dudes with all the three-letter things behind their names are making the story work. But you do that. That's business. You have to do those things. So they got through the quarter. I think based on today and where they're looking and what's coming, I think they're confident they're going to get through the next quarter, and they're still sitting on quite a bit of money given what their burn rate has been reduced to through all the savings. So, they definitely have time to keep operating, and, if things are stabling out or becoming more stable, that's really positive. You'd rather it be stable at a massive number, like billions of dollars of revenue per quarter, but, being stable at a lower number is still okay. And it gives them a lot of opportunities because they are playing with a lot of different assets, and they do have things cooking that are exciting. Project Ion, it's a project. It's not really products yet, but at some point that becomes something that hopefully makes money. One other side note that Chen mentioned today was in regards to BBM, and I couldn't quite hear what he was saying, so correct me with what I heard wrong. But it sounded like he said it's going to be making $100 million in revenue by the end of next year, was kind of what they were thinking is possible, which, if that's true, that's a huge number. He did give some numbers saying they have 160 million installs, 85 active monthly users. So, making that kind of money off 85 million users, maybe that's doable. I'm not sure. I mean, I've dropped a lot of money on stickers, so maybe between us we'll push the numbers there.
50 million I think those are BlackBerry users, so just for perspective.
I think he also said that he's expecting it to hit 100 million active users after the Windows Phone BBM launch. So I'm sure that's going to help him out a whole bunch.
It is. I mean, it's kind of sad that that's going to be required to get them there. You know what I mean? Like, and I've kind of had the assumption that the numbers have been a little bit flatlining because you'd be hearing, if the numbers were really great, you'd be hearing every week from the BBM team that, we passed 100 million, we're at this. They would keep that story going. So I think, they had a lot of downloads on iOS and Android, some definite growth, and then it's kind of holding stable. They're going to get more growth out of Windows Phone. Hopefully they keep adding new features and doing the apps to be really awesome on all the platforms, and we see some things happen that help to kickstart it up again. BBM going desktop, which Blaze says they've had for years.
Well, that's the other. That's one thing that they actually didn't mention. They didn't mention anything about BlackBerry Blend, and at this point, it's kind of hard to deny. It's more, we've seen it so many times now, and it's actually built into BlackBerry 10.3, and people are running leaked builds of BlackBerry 10.3, so where is it? Of course,
so maybe that's part of the BES 12 betas or BBM protected betas and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in beta at this point. That there's no denying that it's in beta, and if rumors are correct, which sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't, it'll either roll out with BlackBerry 10.3 or BlackBerry 10.3.1, whichever you actually get. But they've been showing it off, and at this point, I just simply don't understand why they're not saying anything about it. To me, it's a pretty big deal, and a lot of people are actually waiting for it. I mean, even with the leak build that was out there, and honestly, BlackBerry sent me a takedown notice personally. It wasn't even a CrackBerry notice. It was directed towards me to remove it. So like, what's going on there? Why hasn't it been announced?
Well, you gotta save something to announce, right?
That's kind of awesome that you personally got the takedown notice. I really like that. That's
yeah. I was
one more reason why you get to be interim EIC of CrackBerry, aka.
Yeah, it was funny. Like, I just woke up and this takedown notice in my inbox. I'm like, oh, kind of expected it anyway. And my web hosting provider was like, well, you've had an account here for years, so we won't shut it down. Just make sure that you go ahead and delete it immediately. I'm like, no worries. I kind of expected it anyways. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know why they're not announcing it. I think it would actually be a good thing to announce and a good thing to put out there and acknowledge at this point, because as far as we know, the only place that they've actually been showing it off outside of internal betas and demos and stuff like that is, the BlackBerry experience events. And some of that stuff is, NDA, and nobody can actually see any of that stuff unless you actually attend the event. So that's that.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
So
Should we talk about mobile Fit Month? Does anybody
Yeah.
think that's skinnier or not compared to our last
You look
podcast?
fantastic.
Well, here's the thing. Adam is doing it.
My skin looks good.
I believe Simon is probably taking part as well. Kevin is definitely taking part. He's got like an exercise bike right behind him there. And me, well, I'm just kind of skinny already, so
He doesn't have to work it out. Sad.
I avoid exercise because if I do exercise, I might lose more weight and totally disappear on you guys. So.
I don't know if skinny means healthy, though.
Chris is extremely healthy.
I
What are you
never once
talking
claimed to
about?
be healthy. I know right now I
It's
am
not called Mobile Health Month. It's called Mobile Fit Month. It's totally
That's
different.
true.
Okay, there we go.
Next month, if you want to do Mobile Health Month, then Chris can participate.
Kind
A
of
little
funny.
different.
You can give up full throttle for a month. I don't even know what would happen.
Then he would really die. He would shrivel up and die.
Okay. Well, so without Yumi, I think we got through the financial stuff okay. Is there anything big we missed? I think we hit the highlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Shares are up. And,
think we really missed anything. I mean, at this point, everybody, just looking from the comments on CrackBerry, I think the majority of the people that were interested in the financials, Yumi wrote up his easy to read post for stupid people like me when it comes to numbers like that. So I think the majority of people understand what's going on there, and right now BlackBerry is in a better situation than what they have been previously. That's the overall consensus, and it's showing in the mainstream media as well. It's not just CrackBerry that's saying that. I mean, if you guys checked out any of the other sites, I mean, there's lots of reports going out, like good headlines, and nobody could really find a true fault in it. You couldn't even make something up at that point because the statistics and the data were all there. You can't, here's what we did, and it's there. We did it. We did something. We did what most people expected us not to do, and that's it. And go write some good headlines. And
boom. Now, Simon, what I want to know is, it felt listening to the AGM but not being in the room that John Chen had a lot of support. I think there's a lot of trust and faith in him as CEO.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you also have to take into account that all of the people attending this place live are locals, right? That RIM and BlackBerry have been a big part of the region for a long time. They've employed a lot of people around here. And BlackBerry's improved the community, too. I mean, they've invested in the schools. So the public at large in this region is going to be more positive towards the company than maybe the shareholder body at large. I would certainly say that most of the people, barring Mr. Gould there, were overwhelmingly positive about the whole thing. They were all very supportive, while still being very realistic about the situation. Just like John Chen is, he's a great public speaker, and he's very honest and earnest about where BlackBerry is. And how much they're doing and how much they're not doing. But I would say the overall vibe was what was certainly positive from the local shareholders.
Prem Watsa seem happy? Did he speak at all or not really?
No, not really.
How's he come across? I've never seen him, but he's obviously like a uber smart rich guy. Is he?
I only caught a glimpse of him. He was sitting in the front row with a couple of the other executives, but he didn't stand up or talk or anything. He was just kind of in there soaking it in, and then shuffled right out once it was done. So,
no Mike Lazaridis, I guess. No Mike L.
No.
Last year 2 years ago, I sat so close behind him at the AGM that I could have just reached out and grabbed his beautiful white hair, and I never did. To this day, I still haven't met him in person. I've been close enough to breathe down his neck, though, but I was too scared to tap him on the shoulder and say hi. It's kind of
Slightly creepy.
I went totally creepy with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we go into massive changes at CrackBerry.com next, or what?
Yes.
So this is really exciting. If people dive into the forums, and I think most of our live listeners are probably hardcore, so this won't be a surprise to them. But I started a forum thread on Sunday night, Father's Day, based on something I've been thinking about for a while, and I was like, I just wanted to see how the community react to it, because I figured they'd react really well, and they did. So now we're pulling the trigger. And the forum thread was, I vote Blaze to be editor-in-chief of CrackBerry.com. And we're going to shake things up with some changes. Now, this doesn't mean I'm abandoning BlackBerry and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean...
Really, because you talk a lot, right? So talk. You need to talk, so...
Yeah, I like to talk. I mean, well, you can't really get rid of being a founder, right? It's just a thing you don't walk away from, and you can't walk away from years of your life and history. And I don't have any desire to. But I think the thing that's been apparent lately is the CrackBerry community needs a lot of attention. And through last year, the first half of the year, I mean, I pretty much put my life on hold for the launch of BB10, right? I mean, I moved out of the house. I abandoned my fiance. We went to Toronto for a month, New York. I was pretty much gone 24/7. We were relaunching the new CB in the meantime, also, which was like weeks of hardcore nights and late nights getting all that stuff done. And then carried that right through. And then back half of the year, I had to get back to doing all of my other responsibilities too. Still putting a lot of time into CB at that point. And then, once all the strategic alternatives and all those kinds of things hit, at that point, I'm just like, this kind of sucks, right? Like, things get less fun than they used to be, but at the same time, that's where you need to put a lot more time into it, and at the same time, I have to put a lot of time into all my other responsibilities across all of our sites and mobile nations as a whole. And, Adam picked up the slack for me big time, the whole team did. And then, back half of the year, we wanted to launch Connectedly, and Adam has a lot of passion for that connected space. So, we've been doing that also, which is that, again, for Adam, splitting time a bit more. And, Blaze, we've had you working on some things across all the sites. And then what that leaves is, not necessarily that full-time 24/7, 365, just focus on the CrackBerry community. And, it needs that, right? And it deserves that. And, it makes sense to put Blaze in as that guy. And, total confidence that, one, you know how to do the role. Two, you're, of the team, you're the most hardcore in the forums. You've lived in the forums since 2007 pretty much, right? That is your home period. And that's kind of the key right now. So, the community is definitely behind it. I'm behind it. I think it's all good. For Adam, it's maybe the biggest change because you're going to really put your focus on Connectedly and, drop into CrackBerry from time to time, but be, much less hands-on, which you've been probably the most hands-on, at least dealing with me being a pain in the butt. For me, it's kind of the same thing as it's been the last year, though, because really, I've been dropping in when I want to with content and in the forums. But it's not the 24/7 that it used to be, right, for many, many years. So, in the comments, there's some different comments right now, and really there's a lot of ways to think of it, right? It's kind of like when you have a company and you have the CEO and the chairman, and then the CEO says, you know what, I'm going to put in a new CEO and just be on the board. It's kind of like that.
Silly.
Yeah, well, more like Mike L, because Jim sold his shares right away and was out, you know.
You're
Mike
not gonna
L
sell
is
your
still
shares.
hanging in there.
I'm selling my shares.
Yeah. And I like to talk too much, so, you know, I'm going to be in all the time. So for me, honestly, I might end up posting more just because I'll want to, like, make sure I don't slip away. But, you know, so that's going to happen. What else is happening around this? Oh, and I think a key thing is for people to understand, you know, what does editor-in-chief mean? Because, honestly, I hate titles, right? I'm one of those guys that I kind of think the world would be a better place if people didn't fight so much for titles and they just let, you know, the work they do speak for themselves. But, you know, really, editor-in-chief is sort of this legacy title from the publishing industry. And for a long time, we didn't even have titles on CrackBerry.com. I don't think I had a title for most of the years. I would sign emails when I had to with Fearless Leader of CrackBerry Nation, which I don't know if that's a title. But then, you know, when you go to events like CES, then that, and you hand out business cards to people, and you're trying to get, you know, access for interviews, apparently you need titles, and editor-in-chief is the key one. For me, the way I've always looked at CrackBerry, probably within 3 months of launching the site, was like being the ringmaster of a 3-ring circus. And it's a funny analogy, but it's really apt. And the way I've always looked at it is, you know, and 3 rings is very apt in our case because we've always had the blogs and the forums and our stores. And it's sort of these 3 core elements that make up CrackBerry. And, you know, the editor-in-chief is not the star of the show. The content is the star of the show, right? Whether it's the hard-hitting news and the stuff that hits the blogs, whether it's the forum community itself and what the community's up to, or it's the stuff that's happening in the stores. And, you know, my job as the ringmaster is to kind of highlight the best for the people in the audience. And, you know, from time to time when things are quiet, aka between device launches and all that, you know, you become the guy who goes in the ring to kill a few minutes and have some fun and keep everybody entertained until the next act comes on. And that's always been my goal. So for me, this is just a really, you know, we're mixing things up with a new ringmaster. We're going to have some fun. You know, one of the things I'm forcing Blaze to do is move to Waterloo, Ontario. That was right on cue.
Did you really have that on tap?
Waterloo. Blaze and Waterloo will be amazing. And it's something that, honestly, I thought about doing for the longest time, and I couldn't make it happen. But I think for Blaze, we're going to figure out how to make it happen. In which case, I'll probably visit Waterloo even more often. It's going to be so good. And that's kind of it. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Is there any questions from anybody? I just don't want to.
Is that actually going to happen? Blaze, like, are you really going to move to Waterloo? Is this something you're hardcore about doing?
Well, it's definitely on the plate. Much to Kevin's dismay. Much to Kevin's dismay, it has not officially been dealt with as of yet. But
if Kevin had his way, Blaze would have been there like 3 days ago.
Yeah, it's already decided. I'm like John Chen. Once I make up my mind, I don't waste time. Let's do it. It's a good idea. Why wouldn't you want to go to Waterloo?
It's a good idea.
Taco Tuesday every Tuesday.
What? I didn't know that. I'd be in Waterloo.
I think Ethel's. It's so good. What?
It absolutely is a good idea in terms of being closer to BlackBerry for providing, you know, at least a little bit better coverage of what's actually happening. You know, Simon, you're in Waterloo right now, and you know you had to make that trip out to Waterloo. If somebody was already there, then you wouldn't have had to make that trip. You know.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
Stayed home. You could have took care of whatever from you know your spot. And I'm sitting in Halifax, and as much as I love Halifax, there's not exactly a whole lot going on in Halifax right at this point. And when you look at Halifax compared to Waterloo and pretty much everywhere else, if you like technology, then Waterloo is pretty much one of the places in Canada that you want to be. And it's a logical decision, but it's something that I'm not ready to go ahead and just go hurrah all right yet. It's something that is highly being considered, but other than that.
Well, I figure Blaze has till Sunday to do it. So far, like, we've been kind of keeping the, you know, everybody's fired, Blaze is still in message to the forums and the odd link in a blog post and tweet and that. But I think on Sunday for my editor's desk post, I'll do like the official headline. So we'll make it more official. But I was going to write into that post that he absolutely is 1,000%, moving to Waterloo. So.
I tell you, it's a nice city. I mean, I've been coming here since I was a kid. I've got family here. My aunt actually works at Wilfrid Laurier University, where the AGM was held, and she does a lot of the writing for highlighting how awesome the technology industry is in Waterloo. And apparently, 68% of Canadian startups are born in KW. There's just really good computer science program here, and just in terms of like getting around, there's lots of shows here, live shows, lots of great bars, lots of good food. Nice medium-sized town too. It's like not huge and overwhelming like Toronto, but it's still within arm's length of Toronto if you need to get in touch with anybody with money. So.
And Taco Tuesdays. Taco Tuesdays. One thing too. So in the chat room here, Bill Kingston, he brings up a good point, right? He says, "I'm going to give some feedback, and please don't take this the wrong way. I think Kevin portrays a better business casual image. I believe Blaze has the potential, but he will need to step it up image-wise, for an industry-leading website." Now, here's the good news. I'm not leaving, right? So when it comes to things like interviews, or if we get, John Chen interviews and that kind of thing, or somebody wants to interview CrackBerry for CNN or NBC, I will be here and all around that. I will still be the guy who knows how to put the company's best foot forward in any situation. But just on the day-to-day, I won't be necessarily in the comments and forum posts as fast, but I'll be up to speed on everything still. And you can't really quit a crack addiction that easily, nor do I want to, because it's amazing. Maybe there's another reason why I'm getting skinnier, and it's not mobile fit. No, I'm kidding. I went there.
At the same time, I know that I don't take any offense to Bill's remarks either, because I know that sometimes, I'm fully aware of
That's what makes you Blaze. You don't want to change Blaze. Blaze is like...
Yeah. I'm me. I'm here, and I do a lot of hard work. I might not necessarily have the prettiest face in the world, but hey, I work hard.
You're my man crush. Honest to God, if there's a man I have a man crush on, it is Blaze. I've said that many times.
And we keep Kevin around to be that pretty face and the all-knowing expert on everything BlackBerry. So
my only fear is Blaze ends up in going to Hollywood, because he should be in movies. I feel just have this look.
My alter ego.
Typically, you're always a bad guy involved in drug deals, but it's a very good look.
Kind of fit that role, yeah. All right. So Yumi did message me and just let me know that he did have a few things to actually go ahead and actually take care of, so he's not going to be joining us today. So I apologize for that situation, that he wasn't actually here. He honestly really did want to be here, but things happen, and we made our way through it anyways. Anything else that you guys want to cover today? Any closing thoughts?
In the chat room, if there's questions, ask them. On Adam, are you coming back on any more podcasts? That's what I'd like to know. Or are you going to take a break for a while and just focus on Connectedly? I mean, I think it's like you have an open invitation to come back on.
I might come back and visit it, but I'm not really sure how that's going to go. I love being here, but I figure I'll still see you on the Connectedly podcast all the time anyway. So.
And to Adam's credit, he did help me.
I'll do guest appearance.
I'm going to do guest appearances on Connectedly because I want that. That's your show to build.
So we can guest each other's appearances.
Guest each other. That's fun.
That's weird.
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
Things to talk about otherwise.
I think we're pretty done.
Yeah. I mean, the only closing thought I have is that John Chen is so goddamn funny. Like, he is such a relaxed,
funnier than John Ledger. Did he curse as much as John Ledger did?
Not quite. He brought him up though. He said the T-Mobile CEO and I, we aren't really on each other's Christmas lists this year. And it's like it's totally tongue in cheek, under the radar, and he's got a great sense of humor, even during like fairly serious times financially. He brings a lot of levity, and I'm happy for it.
I think what's cool is you look at John Chen and he he knew what he was walking into, and he accepted a challenge, right? I mean, you think about Torsten Heinz as a little different scenario where, the old guys, the founders were out. He was put into place. Great opportunity, but the plan of attack was very much in motion, and he kind of had to right size while pushing through something to market that wasn't necessarily his vision, and didn't pan out the way they wanted it to with the results. But then, with Chen, it's a little bit different, where he's coming in with no baggage, reorganizing things, a lot of challenges, but, he came into it looking for that challenge. He's not coming into it being like, look what I was handed, this makes it really hard. It's kind of like a full challenge he wanted to take on, and I think he's shown in these past 7 months that he's up for the challenge, which is what I think is really impressive. I think there's no cool. Oh, Simon, this is a good question. So with the BlackBerry Passport, there's been lots of talk about this capacitive keyboard that allows you to do gestures. Did you get any sense of anything special about the keyboard while looking at it in person today?
No, because he didn't really use it that much. I mean, he navigated some of the windows in terms of just like getting from point A to point B. It was running 10.3. But he didn't type anything on it. Most of the time he was in the middle of a conversation, waving the phone around a whole bunch so he could barely get a picture of it. Or we had him against the wall, and he was just kind of holding up for the firing squad of traditional media press with giant cameras. So yeah, no, I didn't get a lot of hands-on time or impressions in terms of like how it's getting used. A touchscreen keyboard would be cool though, for sure. Like, yeah, I could see some use there, but. Very few hints. They were very tight about how much of that they were showing off.
Cool. Also, final note, I do want to say this is the amazing CrackBerry Racing polo. Thank you, Michelle, Blaze's fiance, for getting them for us and putting that together. It's like the most annoying I've ever been to somebody in the last 7 years was to Michelle getting these T-shirts in time for Montreal at the F1 Grand Prix. She did a great job on it.
And they almost didn't make it here because I had to bring them up from Jersey with me, and they didn't show up until like 7 o'clock the night before we left.
Exactly.
It's dangerous.
But keep fighting Michael. Michael Schumacher is out of the hospital, out of his coma. Pretty amazing.
We were bad luck for the BlackBerry team racing since they didn't win, but we were good luck for Michael Schumacher. So.
Yeah, pretty happy about that because that's just sad. Anyways, let's finish on a happy note and call that a wrap, Blaze. I'll let you take it out. You get to run the next podcast, and I'll just be a guest if I'm around.
Sounds good.
Passing of the torch. Do I have a BlackBerry torch here to pass you?
Oh, boy.
No. Oh, I am going to ship Blaze, though, my P9982 because that's the, I figure that's like that's the senior shtick or whatever it's called. That's the torch we're going to pass, so. Use it well, my young Padawan.
Sound good to me.
Okay, bye.
All right, so with all of that wrapped up, I just want to say thanks to everybody for joining us today, and I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. And check out all of the articles if we happen to miss anything, or if we did miss something in the conversation and you want to hear more about it, let us know. Other than that, I'm out of here. Kevin's out of here. Simon's out of here.
You gotta say Blaze out. You gotta be like. Wait, or light it up. How about light it up? I think it should be lighted up. Just like light it up.
No, you're not helping my image here, Kevin.
You're
the end of
damaging
an hour-long podcast. Anybody who's listening this far loves you.
It's quiet time.
That's true. Only Michelle's left in the chat, though. So what's that tell you? No, I'm just kidding. All right. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Peace.